Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. My guest today is Jodi Cilley, a filmmaker from Tijuana, who's the president and the founder of the Film Consortium San Diego. She's a filmmaker. She's also a writer for the San Diego Union Tribune. And today with her, we will be talking about life at the border. So the differences between San Diego and Tijuana, or life in these twin cities, if we can say that. Welcome, Jodi, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Well, would you like to tell us something to introduce yourself before we start, if you want to say something more precise than what I said?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a filmmaker in San Diego. I'm also a film professor at San Diego City College. And I produce a lot of projects as well. I produce film festivals, award shows, TV shows. So I've got a lot of, all in San Diego. You know, I know we're a couple hours from LA, but San Diego itself has a lot of great art and artists in it as well. And it's just a beautiful city to work in. So yeah, and I've been here in San Diego and Tijuana for 22 years, about 9 of those in Tijuana and about 11 of those in San Diego.
So you're very familiar with the area?
Yes, very familiar with the area. Big fan.
Okay, let me ask you something just to start. Tijuana and San Diego are very close. They are part of the same agglomeration. Is there any kind of feeling that they are like twin cities, or just one single community divided by the border, or nothing of the sort?
You know, when I first moved here, I didn't really understand how close it was to Tijuana, to Mexico, until someone pointed it out. And here's the thing. If you are involved in, let's say, cross-border businesses, or if you are somebody who has family in Mexico or travels to Mexico a lot, it does feel like another neighborhood of, you know, San Diego feels like other neighborhoods of Tijuana. Tijuana feels like another neighborhood of San Diego. But for the vast majority of people, that border, that physical wall, is a mental wall as well. Okay. It creates a very large mental and emotional barrier to the, to Tijuana from San Diegans. So you get a lot of San Diegans who would never consider living or visiting Mexico just because of all that goes on in the press. And then that big wall guarded by the military, you know, by the Border Patrol. And the process of crossing the border as an average citizen can be really long. There are ways to get across it very quickly. If you are a commuter and you get a special global entry or century pass, it can be a 10-minute process. But if you're just in the general line, that can be hours and hours. So there's a big mental barrier there for a lot of people. For people who have either work on both sides of the border, or, you know, have businesses that use, you know, that deliver or like sell goods on either side of the border, then yeah, there is a feeling. And often the business people in San Diego and Tijuana are constantly trying to sort of reiterate, we're a region, we're all one big community. But yeah, that wall is a big divide that really separates a lot of people's acceptance of that idea.
Okay, but Tijuana is the most dangerous city in the world as far as the homicide rate. So say that I were vacationing in San Diego and I wanted to visit Tijuana, like for a dinner or to enjoy some nightlife. Would it be dangerous to do it, or would it be fine if I don't go to dangerous neighborhoods?
Visiting Tijuana as a tourist is fine. It's great. The food is phenomenal. The nightlife is incredible. The shopping is extraordinary. You will not feel threatened. You may feel uncomfortable. It's a different country. It's very poor. There's a sort of a comfort zone issue. But as long as you're not selling drugs, dealing with the cartel, hanging out in weird neighborhoods at weird hours, you know, you're going to be fine. There's an entire industry of local tourism because opened up over the last 10 years and catered to people in Tijuana coming out and, you know, enjoying food and beverages and music. So on an average night, there's thousands of people in the street just there to, you know, eat, drink, see art, enjoy music, and go home. So, having spent 9 years in Tijuana, staying away from the shady people in the shady neighborhoods, not all the shady neighborhoods, there's a few I've definitely visited. I've never had a problem. I've never felt threatened. I've never been threatened. I've never been robbed. I've never been approached. I mean, you get your average person, you might get approached, like begged for food or for change, but for the most part, you're going to be left alone, and you can and just enjoy the awesome nightlife and dinners. And I mean, some of the best food. It's incredible. It's incredible the food you can get here. And one thing I said in the article that I firmly believe, I'm far more nervous in San Diego, because San Diego and the US in general has a huge mental health crisis and a huge homeless crisis. So if you're walking down the street in San Diego between point A and point B, you're going to run into maybe a dozen homeless people, half of them with mental health issues, who might try and approach you, yell at you, scream, do whatever. And I've had far worse experiences in San Diego because of that. I can walk 10 blocks in downtown Tijuana and not see a single homeless person, and not see anyone with mental health issues causing, anxiety or stress to the people walking by. You may see one person, and that to me is a big difference. You imagine that the US is safer, but the reality is the violence in the US, the problems in the US are very random. So if it's happening to you, it's not because you did anything. It's because you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Especially with the shootings and the mass shootings. In Mexico, if you're murdered, like, you were probably involved with the wrong people, or potentially targeted for, there's definitely politicians, journalists and such who get targeted, business owners. But it's, as a tourist, that's not really something you deal with. I mean, if I were driving around a Porsche, trying to sort of show off my wealth, maybe that would be different. But as long as you're not out there kind of looking for it, I think you can pretty much avoid it at all, 100% of the time.
It's isolated. It's organized crime by itself.
Isolated, yeah. I mean, you hear about, in my neighborhood, I live in the beach. My neighborhood, you hear about shootings, but it's very specific. It's like someone came into the mall and shot this guy. And I have this conversation with my Mexican friends and neighbors. They don't fully understand the idea of someone, for example, walking into a school and shooting a bunch of kids. Like, that's not a thing that happens here. And I have many, theories as to why, but it's not a thing that happens here at all. So that's not really, that type of random violence doesn't happen, but it happens all the time in the US and probably other countries.
Oh, yeah. So if you drive from California to Tijuana, what are visually the most striking differences that you see? What tells you that you're not in the USA anymore?
Well, the first time I ever, because I'm from Vermont, which is a rural mountain state in New England, and very, very sparsely populated, second least populated state. So I come from a very different environment than what's here. When the first time, I'll never forget it, the first time I ever drove to Tijuana, I got on the highway. I didn't even go through the city, and I was driving by the city. And I had just never seen, we'll say, poverty on that level. I had never seen like cardboard houses and like, sort of, they call them cartonlandia, like cardboard house box land. I had never seen that kind of life, I guess. So the biggest difference is just the level of poverty and, we'll say, like, general visual exterior appearances of everything is significantly different. San Diego is a beautiful city. San Diego is a city that has been optimized to be gorgeous from the minute you land until the minute you leave, from its location on the water, the bays, the boats, the palm trees. It's a desert city. So all the plant life has been imported and built. So it's kind of almost like a movie set. Like it's all, none of it's natural necessarily, unless you get kind of outside in the outskirts. It's all sort of constructed. So it's very beautifully constructed. So you get San Diego and parks everywhere and the ocean and beaches. And so you get that. Tijuana is far grittier. It's far poorer. It's far more visually sort of rough, I would say. That's the first thing you see. Back to when I first came down here, I'd never seen it. I almost like drove off the road. I was in such shock because I hadn't seen that type of living before. And I think that's the most distinct difference.
Okay, you say in one of your articles on the San Diego Union Tribune that Tijuana is San Diego's best kept secret, something of the sort.
Yeah.
So you like Tijuana a lot. Would you like to elaborate on why?
Well, I like Tijuana a lot for 100 reasons, but one of the biggest thing to me is my stress levels down here are way lower. Mm-hmm. I think living in the US is very stressful, at least on me. I don't know about everybody. Cost of everything is super high. The sort of problems you can encounter with neighbors and noise and sort of like just going about your average life, parking tickets and jobs and the things you kind of have to deal with in the US in San Diego and wherever, I think are especially San Diego is very expensive, are very stressful for me. And so I lived here for about 6 years, and then I, for no real reason, moved back to San Diego. And then about 3 years ago, I was like, oh, let me take a summer in Tijuana. Just moved to the beach for the summer. And within 6 months, like my anxiety levels were kind of gone. My stress levels were much lower. My happiness and health, and food, and all the different factors that make me happy, really increased. So it's just, I'm more comfortable here. I think, there's such a rough exterior. If you can get past the rough exterior and just kind of live the experiences that are here, it's a very unique place. Things will happen here that would never happen in it just legally would never be allowed to happen in the US. There's so much regulation. Mexico's more of a like live and let live kind of place. Meaning if I want to throw a party and blast music at the top volume until 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or a Friday or, a Sunday even, no one's really going to say anything. There's never going to be a police visit. There's never going to be a mad neighbor. As long as the next time my neighbors do that, I don't say anything and I don't do anything. There's sort of that, you can do things here that you couldn't do in other places. And I'm not saying bad things. I just mean great, fun things that you can have. You can live experiences that would never really be allowed, we'll say, in San Diego or the US because of so much regulation. And that's, to me, one of the reasons. Other than that, the food, the people, the cost. I mean, everything here, not everything, but 95% of things here are a half to a fourth of the cost of what they would be in San Diego. So if I'm going to get my car fixed in San Diego, that would cost $2,000. Here it costs $500. So it's just less pressure financially. Like I don't have to, I'm an artist. I'm in film. I'm not in business. I'm not in finance, real estate. I'm not making a ton of money doing what I'm doing. So here I can kind of live like a middle-class person, even though in the US, I would be a very poor person. Here I can live great. I can go out, I can buy my friends drinks, I can have dinner at the nicest restaurants in town. I can, just kind of get fix things when I need to, pay for things when I need to, and not have to worry so much about the price of everything.
Okay, I understand. Well, if on YouTube you search for Tijuana nightlife, you would see plenty of videos showing drug dealers or prostitutes. Is that really the case also in the most crowded areas, or is just, as you were saying before, isolated to bad neighborhoods?
Well, there's one neighborhood. There's just really one neighborhood. It's called the Cahuila, the red light district. It's off of the main road in downtown, which is Revolucion and Constitution. So it's really like a couple blocks where there's prostitution. I don't know about drug dealers. I haven't seen, I mean, just it's a little, the sketchy level definitely is higher in that area. But I wouldn't even necessarily call that neighborhood dangerous. I mean, it's heavily policed. There's nice, it's kind of got a facelift lately. There's nicer establishments coming in. The problem was, and we can go back in history here, the problem was for many years, the military of the US was sort of the main clients coming down here. Up until about 10 or 11 years ago, when they were all like banned from ever coming to Tijuana. So when those folks came down here, they wanted sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And supply demand, you know, you get tons of Americans with a ton of money, pouring money into those things. There's going to be more and more and more of that. What happened when they banned the military about 10 years ago. And then there was the financial crisis, and then there was the drug war, which was 2007 and 2009. During that time, like all tourism from the US to Mexico just kind of stopped, or to Tijuana. I won't say to Mexico because Mexico's got a lot of tourism to different parts, but we'll say people stopped coming to Tijuana in mass. That changed the landscape of the city. I was living here during that time. I was living here until 2010. So I lived through the beginning and the end, beginning, middle, and end of the drug war. And then the aftermath of sort of there being no tourism. So what happened was that it changed the landscape of the city. All these, for a while, it was kind of, there wasn't much happening. And then the businesses started focusing on local tourism, getting Tijuana people to come out and go out at night. So, and they're not coming out to buy drugs and get prostitutes. They're coming out to eat, drink, and hang out with their family and friends, and maybe music and art, movies. I mean, you know, what families would do and what, you know, middle class and upper middle class Mexicans would do. So the entire downtown area is completely transformed. There's that section of town that's still there, but it's, you know, it's right there, but it's not, doesn't spill into the rest of the city. The main streets in Tijuana no longer have all the poncho shops and the, you know, sombrero shops and all the curios, all that went away. Now it's now it's little pasajes, which are little passageways, because Tijuana downtown has little passageways between the streets that they've taken back and created all these beautiful art areas. There's high-end restaurants, there's coffee shops, there's jazz bars. I mean, there's rock bars, there's clubs. You know, what used to be the main personality of the city is no longer the main personality of the city, because the people paying for that went away 12 years ago. So yeah, you can still get that, and that's what people think of when they think of Tijuana, but it's a specific effort that you'd have to make. It is definitely not around you ever until you get up until people come to town and say, I want to go to the red light district. And then now you're in that area. And even, like I said, even in that area, a lot of nice restaurants and high-end bars and such are starting to open. So I think even that's changing a bit. The grittiness of that area is getting cleaned up a little bit, but definitely not all over the city. Barely all over the city. What you're going to get is working class people and their families living their life, and upper middle class or middle class people living their life. And you know, you have a culture that's heavily focused on family. So there's like lots of like family events and family parties and family dinners and birthdays and weddings and all this. So, I mean, what you see 99% of the time is just people living their life. And then 1% of the time you can wander into that neighborhood and see, because anyone who comes to Tijuana wants to at least drive through there, right? Because that's what you think of when you think of Tijuana, but it's definitely not the norm. You know, I had a friend come down here from San Diego. Well, she comes down all the time now, but the first time she came down, while we're in the car, she was just like, am I going to get kidnapped? Can I drink the water? Is someone going to try and sell me drugs? Am I going to get murdered? She's asking me all the questions that are kind of like your standard Tijuana questions. And I laughed at some point. I'm like, could you bring up every stereotype known to man about Tijuana? And now she comes down as often as possible because within 6 hours of being here, she's like, oh, this is really nice. Like, this is a lovely place. The food's good. The people are nice. Like, it's relaxing. So now whenever she gets a chance, she doesn't ask any of those questions anymore because she knows it's not how it goes. But that mentality of, Tijuana being this horrible, dangerous place, that's what most people remember, but that's definitely not what I see. And that's definitely not what, if you give it a chance and come down here, that's definitely not what you'll see.
How serious is the immigration problem in the area?
The migrants?
Yeah.
It kind of comes in, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes, like, there'll be a large group of immigrants or migrants who come from different parts of South America. Right now, because basically everyone comes here to try to get to the US, and then the US's policies on letting them in shifts. So what you'll get is, I don't see it. I mean, I've seen it for sure. Like, there's moments where it's like, oh, the caravan's coming. And then there was a point where 5,000 Haitian refugees came into Tijuana kind of all at once. And that was very visible because, well, you don't get a lot of diversity in Tijuana. It's a lot of, South Americans, Mexicans. So to see this sort of influx of Haitians was kind of very visible. It was just very visible. And that was kind of the big, I'm a filmmaker. I worked on a documentary, kind of working in those communities for when that happened. So that was a big visible thing. So it's a problem in that Tijuana doesn't have resources to necessarily take care of the people who are already here, let alone an influx of people who don't have homes, don't have incomes, don't have food, suddenly here because they're hoping that the US will be soft on their immigration policy and let them in. And that's, not always the case. I think with the Haitians was pretty rough because when they left, there was a different, Obama was in power. And when they got here, when they left Haiti, Obama was in power. When they got here, Trump was in power. So what was sort of like a warm or more accepting, at least theoretically, regime was suddenly a regime that was like, let's build a really big wall and keep everybody out. It was a kind of the opposite. So they got here and the wall was like definitely there to stop them, so that was a particularly tough time for sure. So yeah, it's visible around the city in like tent cities. You'll see like migrant camps, specific areas. It's constrained to specific areas, but something you can see right when you're going to the border to cross, you'll see a migrant camp kind of under a bridge type of area over near that area. So, I mean, it's a city that doesn't have a ton of resources, honestly. So, I mean, there's a lot of money here. I think it's the third largest city in Mexico. So there's a lot of people here, just very poor, not a lot of jobs. Things are very challenging for people trying to succeed and get ahead and such.
How many people commute to work from one city to another? Is it common for a person in Tijuana to have a job in San Diego or the other way around?
Very common, very common. I think it's the busiest border crossing in the world for that reason, is that we're so close. I mean, I could be from here to downtown San Diego in about 40 minutes from my door to door. I could be from here into San Diego in about 30 minutes. 10 minutes from the border is downtown, 10, 15. So there is a ton of people who commute across the border and work in the US and then come back here and live. And, that's one of the big advantages of this area. It's one of the things I'm talking about as to why it's nice to live here, is that a lot of people go to the US, make US dollars, and come down here and spend pesos. So their money goes a lot further.
Okay. Because life is cheap.
Yeah, a quarter to half the price is pretty significant.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
How do the two cultures, the capitalistic American and Latin Mexican, influence each other in the area?
I mean, San Diego is a very Latino friendly city. There's a lot of food, and I mean, you just have a ton of, okay, we'll say if you're in San Diego, you have a ton of Latin influence because there's Mexican and Latin American people all over the place, and food and restaurants and clubs and family. You know, it's really, really, I don't know what the percentage number is, but it's like you're basically in a binational city from a population point of view. The people are both, you know, you got Americans and then you've got a lot of Latinos. When you're in Mexico, it's different. People in Mexico are influenced by and it depends on who you're talking about, of course, but I'd say generally people in Mexico are influenced by Americans to a point. There's sort of the vision of like, you know, I'm always joking that, and it's probably not good to say on a podcast, but I'm gonna say it. I'm always joking. It's a joke, guys, a joke that the Mexican dream is to move to the US.
Yeah.
So the aspirations of people, because of that thing that I'm telling you about, you make US dollars, you spend pesos, you know, the opportunity, the vision is that the opportunities in the US are much greater. Education, jobs, money, access to resources, which is true to a point for sure. But you know, when you're down here, I don't see that much influence. I think the thing with Mexico has a very strong culture. The music is very pronounced. The food is very, very, very specific and pronounced, right? It's not adapted to America. The family environment and the sort of social community atmosphere down here is not at all affected by sort of the individualism of the US people. And that's one of the things I find most interesting, is that you have these huge family units down here, and that's the center of everything, is this sort of the bonds and relationships people have are much stronger down here. And they look, you know, there's this looking out for each other. There's, you know, someone kind of falls off and has problems, people are there to pick them up. In the US, you don't get that. You get people that, like me, who just kind of go off away from the family, forge their own path, and hopefully if they fall, someone's there to help them. But there is not that sort of built-in family support and structure that you have down here. And I don't see that at all influenced. The influences I see are, you know, because we're right on the border, of course you get things like, if there's a holiday in the US, a lot of people down here will celebrate it.
Okay.
You know, Thanksgiving, not a Mexico holiday, but we celebrated Thanksgiving with my neighbors and their family. You know, I cooked and, you know, the whole family came out. You know, certain things like 4th of July, or, you know, they'll still celebrate holidays. There's interest in like US products and goods and food. Like, people love fast food down here. Like Carl's Jr. is like a 5-star restaurant in Tijuana. You know, people are interested in food, but I would say culturally, Mexico has a very strong culture. And even in Tijuana, a city that's could be easily corrupted by its proximity to the US, people really do hold on to that culture really, really strongly. And I'm thinking of 100 experiences that I've had where I'm like, that's very Mexican. Like the music and the sort of just the ambiance of the place doesn't really get corrupted, I would say. Not, I mean, obviously a little bit, but not anywhere near as much as you might imagine. And then the further into Mexico you go, the less you'll even think about America. There is very little influence at all.
And what are the most striking aspects of the San Diego Tijuana area that you don't find in other agglomerations such as El Paso and Juarez or Mexicali, Calexico?
Well, I don't know much about El Paso, and I mean, I've driven through there and been there maybe once or twice, but I mean, San Diego, you get a really strong contrast. San Diego is such a nice city and so wealthy. and Tijuana is such a poor city. So that contrast is very different. Like leaving El Paso to go into Mexico is a little less of a shift in terms of visual experience and sort of environment, I would say. You kind of get, Tijuana is notorious, so you get we were just talking about this the other day. It's like a cosmopolitan experience here. You've got people in Tijuana from all over. A lot of them came here to try to get to the US and then couldn't, so they just settled in Tijuana. So you get, just like San Diego has kind of everything you could want when it comes to food and culture, Tijuana has that too. Tijuana has, it's not as big, but you can find, some restaurant, right in my neighborhood now. I think we have a Korean barbecue. We have multiple Vietnamese restaurants. We have multiple Japanese restaurants, maybe 10 just in my neighborhood. There's that sort of mix of cultures here that you don't necessarily see in other cities, because, like I said, a lot of people come here and then settle. Because even if they don't get to the US, I think Tijuana still offers a lot of opportunities that other parts of like rural Mexico do not.
Okay. Many thanks for all your explanations, Jodi. I think that my viewers will get a very good and interesting insight about life in Tijuana from this interview. So many thanks again for your time and for being so specific and clear in your answers.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'll just introduce.
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce the kite.
Sure.
This is the kite that we found on the streets of Tijuana. It started screaming at us from under a car. It demanded to be adopted.
So we also have a Mexican cat in the interview.
Yep. So she's going to get adopted I got her a home in San Diego.
So she will commute as well.
She will commute. Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's another thing. You get a lot of animals in the streets down here. So when I can help, I try.
Well, that's very nice to do. That's very nice of you.
I'm not keeping him. I'm just getting a kitty for a couple of months, and then somebody else gets the cat.
I know, but at least you provide them shelter for a while, and then you make sure that they have a house and a family.
Yeah, and then I get to visit them one day.
Oh yeah, that's very nice to do. So thanks you both.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for watching this, and see you next time.